back, a reality check on Women's Day. A Thornton Global survey has laid bare how women are still not getting their due in the corporate world. The survey was conducted among 5,500 companies worldwide, covering 36 economies. Now, most of the respondents answered questions over the phone. So here are the crucial findings that you need to remember. India ranks third lowest in the world when it comes to women occupying senior management roles in companies. Only 17% of the top management positions are currently occupied by women in Indian companies. Now, what's worse is 41% of Indian companies do not have any women in any senior management role. The corner office remains a male bastion. Only 7% of Indian companies have women as CEOs or managing directors. Joining me now to discuss this further is the author of the survey, Radhika Jain from Thornton. Thank you so much, Radhika, for joining in on this special discussion. I want to point out the number that I just mentioned. Only 40% of companies do not have women representation in the top leadership role. I'll get into the reasoning in just a bit, but how has, according to your survey, how has India fared versus the likes of North America or Europe?
So interestingly, as you just mentioned, Kritika, India pretty much ranks at the bottom. So we are third from the bottom in terms of the women representation in senior management roles. There's only Japan and Argentina below us. And when you look at it globally, Eastern Europe actually has come across really well in terms of the women representation at senior management roles. So countries like Russia, Estonia, Poland, even Indonesia and Philippines have good diversity in their leadership functions. So India pretty much, when you look at the senior business roles, is right there at the bottom of the heap.
So let's get into the reasoning then. A point in your report suggested that at the entry level, it's a 50-50 between men and women. But as you scale up the corporate ladder higher, there is a significant dip that's seen in terms of the leadership position at least. What are the reasons for this? And breakup, I believe that you have also been able to understand the dynamics in terms of family planning and the impact that it has on individual women roles in the leadership positions. What are the reasons that stand out for you?
So in context of India specifically Kritika, it's obviously, cultural mindset, societal norms, traditional pressures still kind of restrict women from pursuing their professional goals and sometimes even restricting access. Interestingly, when you look at a parallel in terms of China, where China is actually, in the top 10 countries with, good women representation. There, it appears that the one-child policy that China followed may actually have, contributed to the healthy representation of women in the senior business leadership roles, because one-child families, that one child.
So Radhika, is it largely family planning that has led to the mismatch in India, as far as corporate India is concerned?
I won't. No, Kritika, I won't attribute it entirely to family planning. I do believe that in all organizations, and I personally have never faced, any family pressures or the glass ceiling at any organization that I've worked at. I think it's also to do with inherent way that men and women approach, their work life balance, call it, in that way. And, at times it's also about women, how comfortable are they with self-promotion. So, organizations have to embed this in their policies.
Radhika, I want to get to that. Where is corporate India failing in terms of policy making, being conducive to a woman looking at going up in the corporate ladder and also planning family in a balanced manner? Where is the policy then lacking?
So, Kritika, if you look at the regulatory landscape, clearly SEBI as well as the company law mandates a woman director being in the boardrooms of listed companies. Obviously, that does not apply to the unlisted corporate sector. And that's where it's left to corporates to actually embrace the diversity agenda. And this applies to, not just at the leadership levels. It has to, be across the organization at each level. So there has to be mentoring done on just awareness of how the unconscious bias can play out in different settings, and educate your teams on the effect that it can have on business.
I want to talk about the unconscious bias. I agree, the regulator had to finally step in, make it mandatory for some representations in women, and that's not the case for listed companies. So what is being done so far to address that unconscious bias, and what are your recommendations?
Kritika, our survey does actually come out with 3 clear recommendations on this. One is clearly, as I said already, the organizations need to embrace and embed this change at all levels, starting from the entry level. There has to be awareness programs, workshops done on how the unconscious bias can play out. In different settings. It could be feedback conversations, it could be appraisals, in different settings, when you're going to meet a client, etc. So there has to be that awareness about that. Secondly, in every organization, there are different leadership styles. So there has to be promotion of, demonstrating how there may be alternative leadership styles, but each one can be a successful model. So that needs to be done. And thirdly, all organizations, or most organizations these days, do have some sort of mentoring program. But our recommendation is that you have to go beyond mentoring to actually having sponsorship programs, because the right kind of recognition, reward from also the right kind of sponsor can really do wonders in terms of an individual's career advancement.
Okay, Radhika, we are very tight on time. So one last quick question. You mentioned a point in the report where women end up lacking in terms of negotiating skills, and that's the basic right and left brain phenomenon, and it's been mentioned in the report as well. I want to understand, does that reflect in terms of pay scales as far as corporate India is concerned? And very quickly take us through what sectors have women been able to excel in terms of the corporate leadership ladder?
So clearly, services sector, I'll take the latter part of your question first, Kritika. Clearly, in the services sector, you find women, healthy women representation at leadership levels. And the first part of your question, sorry, can you quickly just repeat that? Sorry.
So what I was trying to understand very quickly is that is there a difference in the salary as a result of the unconscious bias, or as a result of negotiating skills for women versus men?
Kritika, our survey specifically doesn't get into parity in pay scales. In our organization, and personally, I don't think that I have encountered parity in pay scales in corporate India, wherever I have worked, and from my experience of with my peers and colleagues.
All right, fair enough, Radhika. Thank you so much for taking us through those details. So that is the Grant Thornton survey with a reality check of where things stand as far as corporate India is concerned. But with that, completely out of time.